message to the billionaire class: you can't have it all.
Welcome to the Evolution of Now. I am your host, Jordan, and I will be kind of my topic this week. And so that's why you're hearing me first, which is kind of weird for you guys, but you'll get used to it. And next, I'll be introducing Michael. Beautiful co-host, Michael. How you doing?
Morning. Literally morning. It's morning. Yeah, it's we're recording Saturday morning today because we missed yesterday due to various issues.
That's right.
Yeah.
And next, I would like to present Aubrey. How you doing, Aubrey?
I'm doing all right.
Very good. And last but not least,
the best for last,
Okay, well, yeah, here you go. Oh, you just wanted your chance.
Oh, look what the cat drag did.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, right then.
Yes,
go ahead
I
and
told
introduce
you, leave
me,
the
please.
garbage outside.
Wow.
Oh man, that's harsh. So
I
yeah,
don't remember
so
who said what the cat dragged in first, but yeah, that was all.
Sure, you took it to another level, but I like it. So yeah, welcome, and yeah, we're back again for another topic this week. But before we get into the thick of it, oh, by the way, the topic at hand is the Israel-Palestinian crisis. Also, I would also like to say this is wrapped into the recent development of Trump deciding to essentially naming Jerusalem the capital of Israel, in a sense. But we'll get more into that. And but let's go over some other news that's happened throughout the week. Any takers? Anybody itching to?
Well, I could tell you about this story if you want. So, the far right's got a bit nuts recently in the UK. I mean, okay, I'll start getting the first one out of the way. The royal wedding was a thing. I know. I don't particularly care. But now that's out of the way. Labour had a by-election down in Lewisham. And so Labour obviously is looking for a candidate to run in Lewisham. So what they did, they had the main shortlist, and then they had they looked to their Black African and Middle Eastern group down there and had them draw up an all Black African Middle Eastern shortlist as well, to run as well, to select the candidate. So they're trying to improve the diversity, and this is one of the ways of doing it. Anyway, the far right got hold of it. They've got a list that's all Black African Middle Eastern group people, and went nuts and claim it's racism against white people. And it's extremely amusing. So she's among 4 activists that were battling out. Oh, it's all they're all female as well, but I think that just how it happened. So yeah.
Even worse, they're all women.
Yeah. All minorities and all women. Christ.
Jesus. All right. Well, that's really something. But moving on, Chris, were there any stories at hand?
Yeah, well, I had a thought to possibly rant and rave about how I don't give a damn about the what's it called, the royal wedding that happened. But then I guess if I were going to be ranting and raving, then I probably care in some way, just to yell at it and everything. So I decided, you know what, not doing it. Nope, just going to leave it away. So I decided we should talk a little bit about Trump's plans in the Arctic. Apparently, Mr. Trump wants to expand our fossil fuel drilling into the Alaskan wilderness. And yeah, I mean, you would be shocked to find out that all of the Republicans in the area, the Republican lawmakers in the area, totally 100% on board for the plan. But there are actually a lot of people in the area that I guess what were they called? I forget the name of them. The Gwich'in people, I believe. I guess they are like native to the area, and it's their lands that are at risk of being destroyed because of the drilling there. They're against the plan. And not only them, though, but there are actually pretty large investors in fossil fuel and other things that are actually completely against this and are warning the Trump administration to not do this because it is risky. When we start drilling in the Arctic, it becomes harder and harder to clean up. And especially if it's in the oceans up in the north, it's almost impossible to ever plug a hole if we actually make one.
When?
If and when, yeah. Basically when. So, yeah, and it's just interesting.
Yeah, imagine the BPL's build up in the Arctic.
Yeah. In frozen waters.
You don't have to. Valdez?
Yeah. But yeah, there's a lawmaker in the area, a Senator Lisa Murkowski, says that this plan would be the single most important step we can take to strengthen our long-term energy security and create new wealth. Because that's always the case with all of these people. All they care about is the wealth generation. That's all they care about in any of these things. Well, is this going to make money for my state? Well, then let's do it. And it doesn't matter if you're destroying the land and the atmosphere in the process. Who gives a damn about that? We want more money for our state. And that's always seems to be the case. And I'm just so tired of this shit, man. Just on a daily basis with these damn Republicans.
I feel like first we need to bring up a couple things. First, Sarah Palin did sign a law so that all oil profits that are a result from like Alaskan oil, every Alaskan gets a share of that. So first of all, more oil drilling in Alaska profits every citizen in Alaska, just financially. So that's one reason why I should probably be in favor of it.
Yeah.
Aside from, given how big the oil industry is in Alaska, I'm sure she has a large number of oil donors. But yeah. And then before we get too caught up in being pissed off at the Trump administration, I'd like to remind us all that Obama opened up the Arctic seas for drilling several times. So
that's very true.
This is not something new.
Yeah. That's a very good point. But the area in
much further extent.
Yeah. The area that's in question right now, though, was actually a place that was put under protection under Dwight D. Eisenhower. When Eisenhower was president, was when this area became a wildlife refuge. And now we're trying to whittle away with that, I guess, and,
Yeah.
drill, baby, drill kind of thing.
Yep. Yeah, that's, yeah, I mean, well, and that's just something that the Trump administration has been uniquely horrible about, is selling off protected lands. Not that this sort of thing didn't happen before. It's just they're like, hey, there's a bit of land there. Anybody want it? So, yeah.
Pretty much, yeah.
Because, I mean, there's been selling off resources from our national parks for a long time, too. So,
yeah.
But.
So that's what I wanted to talk about. Anyone
Anyway.
else have any more stories that they wanted to bring up for the week?
I have a story from Jezebel. Ooh, Jezebel.
Yeah.
The title is "Women Told They Must Ride in the Back of the Bus in Brooklyn." So there is a city bus in Brooklyn. The bus route itself is run by a private bus company, and the bus line was designed specifically to cater to Orthodox Jews, Hasidic Jews. But it actually is still a public bus system. However, let's see. The B110, which travels between Williamsburg and Borough Park, is open to anyone, has a route number, and goes to city bus stops. However, the line is run by a private company under a decades-old agreement with the city. And since the bus is designed to serve the Hasidic community in the area, a board of rabbis sets the rules. They've decreed that women should sit in the back and men should sit in the front to avoid contact between members of the opposite sex. A woman volunteered to go see what happens when someone challenges the regulation. So, she paid the $2.50 fare and took a seat in the front of the bus. Basically, she got hounded and scolded by men till she moved to the back. And the driver did not do anything in the incident.
If they had a private bus, like if they actually had a private bus that no one else could get on, they just had their own bus, I wouldn't care. But it's a publicly open bus, so it serves the public.
Yep.
Right, you do your Jewish thing, but I'm not Jewish.
Why does this remind me so much of the civil rights era, I wonder. It's pretty much the same thing that Rosa Parks did. Like she sat in the front of the bus when the whites were saying, yeah, blacks have to be in the back of the bus. And
yeah, mind you, that was slightly different because she was actually able to sit in the front as long as there wasn't a white person who wanted that seat. As soon as a white person came who wanted that seat, then she had to move.
So these guys are even shittier
segregation laws. Yes, these guys are even. You're not allowed to sit in the same area because you're a woman, and that's for the men. Because we have to keep everybody separate. Let's keep the genders separate. It reminds me a bit of a lot of the Muslim weddings in the Middle East, where the men and women will actually have separate areas where they celebrate. You basically say goodbye to when you show up to the wedding. You say goodbye to your people of the opposite gender or opposite sex, really more like. As you go and celebrate with the other people. Men go celebrate over here, women go celebrate over here.
Similar idea with you don't see the bride the day before. The day before? On the day, something like that. We're not supposed to see the bride for a period of time before the wedding.
Yeah.
It's really weird.
Supposed to be bad luck or whatever. I thought it was just the bride in her wedding dress.
Something like that. I don't know it exactly, but yeah.
It's hard to separate what the tradition is and what's the modern
interpretation.
Yeah, because obviously the ritual will be moderated a lot through our modern sensibilities.
All right.
Yep.
Cool. Very good. With that, how about we move on to our main topic?
It's only a small one.
Just a little bit.
It's a tiny one. We should be able to get through it in like 5 minutes.
Yeah. We might not have a full show today, guys. I don't know.
Yeah, sorry for wasting your time. But yeah, so like I announced earlier, it's about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which has, it's a very loaded topic, and the reason why I picked it this week is because Trump and his administration have officially decided to they opened the new U.S. embassy in Jerusalem, and Jerusalem is a hotbed of so many religions, from Christianity, from Judaism, from Islam. So him making that declaration is essentially letting Israel know that this is your home now. Like, this exclusively belongs to you. And that was a really big problem because that center square, Jerusalem itself, was that land is because it's so sacred. A lot of deadly, well, actually 2 deadly wars, but a lot of conflict has arisen over that land in Israel-Palestine within itself. And that was just on Monday. He made that. They opened it officially on Monday, and since then, 58 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli defense forces, and at least 2,700 have been injured. And as far as we know, there's been a tally of 0 Jewish people who've been killed, which is a good thing. But it's hard to.
I don't think any have even been injured.
Yes, because they weren't protesting.
I heard that someone, one of the Israeli Defense Forces people, was mildly injured by a rock. But that's about it.
Oh, okay.
So
great.
Yeah, basically. So that's what. In
that case, it's all fine.
Right.
It's totally fair.
Exactly. And just to be clear, like, not all, of course, when it comes to protests, there are going to be violent demonstration, but it's a far cry from the overall majority of people who went out there to actually just, to just display their frustration, by just collective, just shouting and just letting their feelings be known. And, but however, that's just a small piece of the overall problem that's been going on between Israel and Palestine. And, if you guys want to, do you want to keep talking about the decision by the Trump administration to have the U.S. embassy in Jerusalem, or do you want to get to the history bit of it all?
Before we get to the history, I'd like to talk about the fact that this idea of moving the embassy to Jerusalem is not a new idea. Congress actually passed a law in the early 90s, I think it was like 94 or something like that, to move the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem. And so, I mean, it's actually a law on our books. But they put in a provision that every 6 months the president can sign a waiver, saying basically, oh, it's not time. It's not a good time to move it. So every president since then has signed that waiver every 6 months. And then basically, including Trump, he signed that initially as well. And then basically he was under pressure from Chuck Schumer and Feinstein and
Benjamin Netanyahu as well, I think.
And Netanyahu,
sure.
as well as a lot of other Republicans too. But I just wanted to highlight specifically the Democrats who pushed for him to actually move the embassy. And then of course they promptly came out and go, "Oh, I can't believe he did that." Really, guys? Really?
Well, I know
Feinstein in particular voted for the original thing too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know that Chuck Schumer he made a public statement about his how thankful he is that Trump made this decision, and I understand that for them it's personal because they do happen to be Jewish, and the reason why presidents of the past have kept kind of pushing it off is because it would cause
because it's stupid.
Well,
because it's stupid.
Well, yes, but also it would cause, and it's stupid because right now we are trying to structure a two-state solution.
We've been theoretically trying to do that for ages. No one's really actually trying.
Right. Unfortunately, when Israel's government was controlled by leftists. Back in the 1970 was the last time a Jewish leftist was presiding over the Israeli government, but there were more hands at the table in order to make it happen. Because since conservatives have kind of taken over, they've been more adamant on kind of
give us everything
taking over everything itself. Right. Exactly.
It was the Israeli government that broke the last ceasefire.
Yeah. And I'd also like to point out that every single president that we've had and presidential candidate, going all the way back to the Clintons and probably before then, have said that they, like on the campaign trail, that they believe that Jerusalem is the undivided capital of Israel, including Obama and Hillary Clinton. So how much of that is campaign rhetoric trying to get Jews to vote for them? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
We were talking, me and Bree, about this, and It's weird. There's also a really big fundamental Christian influence in this, and it shows just how deep-rooted Christianity is in American politics, really, because a lot of this is because Christians think the Jews need to be in Jerusalem for the end time to happen. So, and that's the root of a lot of this policy making, because Christians want the Jews back in the capital, in Jerusalem.
Well, and yeah, I don't know how many also outside of the fundamentalist groups that I grew up in, but the groups that I grew up in, they also believe that essentially the Dome of the Rock needs to be torn down and a Jewish temple needs to be erected on that site. And then once that happens, then the end times can happen.
I mean, in some ways,
of course, the Bible was like the New Testament was like most of the passages and stuff that deal with prophecy. They talk about the temple in Jerusalem. Well, most of those were written around AD 70 or whatever. A lot of that was written prior to Rome destroying the temple in Jerusalem, which happened in AD 70. And then the ones that were written afterwards, well, they had this dream of a Jewish restoration, or at least the Jews did. But it kind of centered around Israel.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I just wanted to add, though, you can see, though, if the Jewish people were actually able to tear down the dome on the rock, how that can actually lead to serious fight, like war, actually, in the area.
Oh, yeah.
Because
definitely.
That is one of the holiest sites in the Islamic faith right now, is that the dome on the rock. And it's sort of like, what? Like, if I don't know. I don't know what a comparison would be to that, because
can you imagine how outraged Christians would be if the Nativity Cathedral in which I believe is down in Bethlehem was torn down?
Or if you bombed Mecca.
Or, if all of a sudden there was dispute over whether or not the papacy should even exist.
Or, I guess, tearing down the Vatican.
The
maybe.
Vatican.
Stuff like that. I mean, this is the kind of religious division we're talking about here. Strong feelings, and there's, especially when you have two major faiths, well, really technically three major faiths, making claim to the same space, and they're all ready to go to war over it.
Yeah.
There's no peaceful resolution there.
And it's reasonable to say, well, this is insane. Why are we worried about all these religions? And the problem is, we think it's crazy. They don't. They're actually ready to fight over this. And the reality of the situation is, we just thrown a giant bomb of TNT into the works.
Yeah, and some of these actors are willing to create the end times and cause the end times if that's how it goes.
Oh yeah, Mike Pence is one of them. He's looking forward to this.
Yeah,
I guarantee you, he was one of those voices in Trump's ear going, "We need to do this. We need to do this."
Yeah, women like Michelle Bachmann too. She used to be a lawmaker in this country, and she isn't anymore. I don't know. I think she was starting to run again, though, somewhere, from what I remember. But she was batshit crazy, just like Mike Pence and so many others of like the evangelical stripe here in America, who they're dominionists, and what they want is a Christian state, just like the Jewish state there being Israel. That's what they want. And
yeah.
ISIS. Al-Qaeda, I think, is my favorite.
The Christians, yeah, they like to call them Al-Qaeda.
Yeah.
No.
That's funny. But
Well, because they're basically the same as Islamic fundamentalists.
They're not that different.
Fundamentalists of all stripes are about the same.
I mean, the article I just read about Hasidic Jews segregating buses. Do you think ISIS wouldn't want that? To have women have to sit in the back of the bus and while the men sit up front?
Pretty much.
Right. But and that goes down to, the fact that there are these fundamental principles that all these religions seem to have. And
because they're based off the same book.
Yeah. Yeah.
It all goes back to the Torah.
And it, and with that being said, there's no surprise why all of these religions are laying claim to Jerusalem or believe, So, so yeah, it's what's so interesting about what's going on after doing research is that in terms of the Palestinian narrative isn't necessarily it's less for a religion thing and more for them a colonialism thing. You're right, where Jews always had their place within how it is now in Israel Palestine, except back in the BC era they were in exile. They had to leave. There are certain reasons for that. It's a lot. Like the history of it is steeped in.
Do you want me to condense it?
If you can, please.
Okay, so everyone knows about King David, King of Israel. Okay, so there was a problem when he died. Basically, his sons disagreed about who should become king, and it led to the kingdom splitting. So you had Judah, which was in the bottom, which included Jerusalem, and then you had the northern kingdoms, which included the vast majority of the tribes of Israel. And they kind of coexisted as these two separate kingdoms next door to each other, both kind of wanted to take each other over, but never quite managing. And then in comes the Assyrian Empire, and they kind of wipe out the northern kingdom. They scattered the northern tribes of Israel all throughout their empire, and all of that. And basically, the result of that was the people who were scattered, because their religion was tied to where they lived, they didn't have any way to maintain their cultural and ethnic identity, and so they just kind of subsumed into the rest of the culture. And that's why they're referred to as the lost tribes of Israel. Judah managed to hold on for quite some time longer, and then the Babylonians came in. They kind of took out Assyria, and then they came further south and they took out Judah. And then we have the period that's called the Babylonian exile, where they took about half the population and spread them throughout the Babylonian Empire. The priests were determined that what happened to the northern tribes would not happen to them, so they came up with a synagogue system, which allowed them to hold on to their religion and worship, continue their religious and ethnic identity, even in exile. And then eventually they were allowed to return to Israel, to Judah, really. And lots of other stuff happened. Eventually, Alexander the Great came in, conquered, and then he died. His 4 generals took control of various parts of his empire, and then you had the Maccabean revolts, and then you got under the Maccabeans, you actually had an independent kingdom of Israel for a very short period of time. I think it was 20 years. And then the Romans came in, and that's when most people pick up and understand that Romans conquered the area, and they held the area during the time of what's generally considered time of Jesus. The time of the New Testament, essentially. In AD 70, the Jews rebelled, and the Romans came in, and they destroyed the temple, and then they scattered the Jews throughout their empire. But thanks to the synagogue system, they managed to hold on to their independent, hold on to their religion and their ethnicity again. And then we have essentially everybody fighting over the area, because by that point, Christianity, by 300, Christianity was the official religion of the Roman Empire, and I think Constantine's mother went down to Palestine, and then she started declaring a bunch of places were holy Christian sites with absolutely no proof, and everybody just believed her because, she knew what she was talking about. And, from there, you commence with the various different fighting over the area. But Jews did not actually resettle back to the Palestinian area until after World War II, which Michael probably knows more about that situation, that time period, than I do, because I think it had a lot to do with the UK, and because Palestine was one of their colonial holdings at that point, I think.
Yeah. We moved. Sorry, I was zoned out for a second. What were you saying?
Sad. Well, I think we were getting right into the modern times of what was going on with Palestine. Before we get to World War II, though, we have to talk about that region. The Ottomans controlled the area for a few hundred years before World War I. But during World War I, the British actually, because they basically predicted they were going to win the war, World War I was against the Ottomans, as well as a few other nations being like mixed in there, but part of it was against the Ottoman Empire. What happened was the British actually took control of the Palestine region, and they promised it to a few different groups at that point. There was a Dominionist movement going on at the time from the Jewish population in Europe. They wanted their own national state, and because they found that Judaism was their nationality, and so the British actually promised the area to them, but they also promised the area to what would become Saudi Arabia. Those people over there, they told them, if you start a revolt in this area over here, we will gift you this land. And they were like, yeah, sure. You're going to give it to us? That's fine. And
because we're nothing if not consistent.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so they gave or promised the land to them, and then they also promised it to themselves. So Britain was trying to give it to everyone all at the same time.
We were trying to have our cake, eat it too, and give it to someone else.
Well, and if they had actually given the land of Palestine to Saudi Arabia, that would leave Saudi Arabia in control of the 3 most holy sites in Islam.
Yeah.
Right now, they control 2 of them. One of which all Muslims are required to visit at least once in their life if they are able.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So basically, that's a good deal for them, right?
Money off that. Yeah.
That would have been a great deal for them to have all of the big holy sites under their control, you know?
Oh, yeah. It would. So, I mean, they already have an outsized control over Islam as it is. But to have that kind of control, that's...
Yeah. You could say, like, I mean, that's Mecca you're talking about is the one place that all Muslims have to go to at least once. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the other place is Medina, which is the 2nd most holy site. And then the Dome of the Rock, which is in Jerusalem, that's the 3rd most holy site.
Yeah. All right. And, but yeah, getting back to the history, though, during World War I, that happened. And then eventually after that point, more and more Jewish settlers kept pushing into Palestine. It was actually considered the British Mandate Palestine at that point, I believe is what they called it. Basically, the British controlled the area. It was basically like a military control of the area. And actually, during that time between World War I and World War II, there actually were a few revolts that broke out from the Israelis. The Jewish populations actually started revolts against the British rule there. And so they were trying to push out the British and take it over for themselves in some ways. The
Zionist movement started towards the end of the 19th century, and there had been a constant stream of Jews moving back to modern day Israel at that point. So I mean, there were several Jews who legitimately moved there before the nation of Israel was ever established.
Yeah.
And before it was even promised to them. So, yeah.
But yeah, there was a lot of infighting in the region trying to kick the British out. And then the Palestinians that were native to the area were getting pushed out because of the Israelis and everything. the British actually eventually put a cap on immigration from the Jewish people from Europe to the area for a while, and they did not like that. But eventually, after World War II, things definitely changed, and I guess Britain decided, you know what, we're just going to try and pull out of the area. They gave the dissecting of the area to the UN, which was just newly put together, the United Nations. And basically the Israel-Palestine conflict and trying to give them both statehood was their first job to try and tackle. And the first maps were really messed up. It looked like a jigsaw puzzle where some areas the Israelis would control, other areas the Palestinians would control, and Jerusalem was supposed to stay as a neutral territory that neither one of those groups actually controlled. And this is, fast forward to today, why it's such a screwed up situation right now. Because the Israelis want to say it's their capital, and it's not. It's not supposed to be. And they don't care. They keep on trying to push that objective and that narrative. And the United States, in allowing an embassy to go there, legitimizes that fight for the Israeli side. And it pushes things further and further for them. I'm sorry?
Right.
Which the Palestinians are understandably not too happy about.
Right.
Just a little bit.
Yeah. I should add that I highly doubt any Palestinians ever thought that the U.S. was a neutral arbiter. They've never considered that. And we frankly never have behaved in that way. I mean, yeah, it's a very complicated and messed up situation there. And it's not helped by the fact that when they did decide to, when they gave the go-ahead to actually go ahead and form the nation of Israel, essentially people moved in and they just kicked out the people who lived there already. No compensation, no resettlement, nothing like that. Which, that's a failing of everybody who was organizing it, but also a failing of a lot of the initial settlers, Jewish settlers, who just got overeager and got tired of waiting and just went in and took matters into their own hands.
Yeah.
I mean, most of those people are dead by now from old age, if nothing else. But I mean, so it's not like they're alive to answer for that.
Yeah, and people in that region looked at this as just more European colonialism. And that was a big reason why the rest of the Middle East, Iran, Iraq area, Egypt, and all of them always had a contention with Israel because they did not like it. They thought it was more colonialism, and they didn't want to have any of it anymore. And so that was part of the reason why they would fight and have the few different wars that they had since the founding of the nation state of Israel in the 1940s.
Right. Yeah, and with Jews moving back or moving to Israel from Israel-Palestine as we know it today, from Europe, the Arabs and Palestinians, there's been so much time that they've been removed from that land that once they return, they look completely different. They're European as far as as far as Arab and Palestinians go, and seeing them, they symbolized this this European colonialism that they weren't all too happy with, and so for them, that's what kind of caused a lot of an uproar within the Palestinian community.
Yeah, I mean, even the primary language of most Jews these days is Yiddish. That's a Germanic language. It comes from a German dialect.
Right.
It's got a lot of loaner words in it. So it's kind of like English in that matter, but it has a German framework. It is a German language.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's also the formation of Israel itself. I mean, the ambitions and ideas of, Zionist Jews aside, the people who facilitated it and organized it, who weren't Jews, who were, running their respective countries and, at the UN and everything, it was also, I mean, you hear talk of, oh, it's a place for, because in World War II, German Jews had nowhere to go to escape. Yes, that is very true. What is equally true that they don't talk about is the wave of expulsion of Jews from several countries around Germany. And Germany and the United States were some of the only countries that were actually taking in Jews at the time, prior to World War II.
Yeah, I think the Austro-Hungarian Empire was not very friendly to the Jewish people, from what I remember.
Right.
Mhm.
We were, in the UK, we were very, very anti-Semitic at that time. To the point where the Daily Mail famously was quite supportive of Hitler's racist policies for a long time, until the war started.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of that as well here in the United States.
Yeah, Henry Ford,
I mean,
was famously in support of the Nazi regime,
Yeah, it's a very complicated and difficult past, and quite frankly, nobody comes out looking good.
Right.
But I mean, also, you have this whole context of, after World War II, they went in, they broke up all the Holocaust camps. Well, you have millions of Jews in these concentration camps, that need to be resettled somewhere. Understandably, they probably don't want to stay in Germany, the same place where they nearly got killed.
Also, being around the people that put you there in the first place, because not everyone, that survived the, World War II there were, innocent in it,
Mm-hmm.
like some of those people were just the same people that destroyed your bakery or whatever else you had before that, because of the fervor of the regime and everything taking full control. A lot of people just go along with it. We see that today in America, where we have racist assholes now being more and more emboldened by the rhetoric of Donald Trump. It's a very similar situation.
Yeah. So all of a sudden you have millions of people who need to go somewhere, but nobody wants to take them.
Mm-hmm.
The scientists and stuff, people want them. The wealthy ones, people want them because they want their money. But what do we do with the rest of these guys? We don't want them. Hey, there's this Jewish movement to create a nation of Israel. We could just stick them somewhere else.
Right.
It's great. And we can kind of make things uncomfortable for them here, so they'll go there. Go away.
Yeah. And right there, I think that's something I want to just kind of go over briefly, which is the Zionism, which essentially it was around in the late 1800s. And however, by 1896, that's when journalist, he was an Austrian Jewish journalist. His name is Theodor Herzl. He was essentially he brought Zionism to an international scale, and through meetings, through different gatherings, he inspired many Jews to kind of think of think of it as just a religion, but as a nationality, and encourage them to move back to essentially their birthplace or the birthplace of their ancestors, and so yeah. So I guess I just wanted to kind of do a little something about that, and just one kind of small little final figure about that. So about before World War II, about 20,000 Jews lived in what we know today as Israel-Palestine. Mm-hmm. So since Adolf Hitler came to power, the number has was about 8 times that.
Yeah.
So,
If I remember correctly, before even like World War I, there was like, I think it was less than 5% of the population of Palestine was Jewish. And after World War II, it was around like 30% or more.
Yeah. So according to the Ottoman records in 1878, the population was 87% Muslim, 10% Christian, and 3% Jewish, and everyone spoke Arabic.
Yeah,
and apparently they lived harmoniously with one another around that time.
Well, and I'd also remind you, though, that just because someone converts, I mean, so it's kind of been traditional throughout history that once you convert to any religion other than Judaism, you cease being a Jew. So how many of those people are actually of Jewish descent? We don't know, because it's highly unlikely that the Roman Empire and all the subsequent conquerors removed all of the Jews from the region. So a lot of those people there who, they're Muslims, they're Palestinians, they probably have Jewish ancestors who probably never left the area in the first place.
Yeah, they could have converted to another religion at some point. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting how it all works. And part of the reason, like, you would think that, like, well, it's just easy. Why don't the Palestinians, the Muslims and the others, like, leave the area, I guess, and then, like, move to, like, I guess, Jordan or the other places around there. But the thing is, the Palestinian people were already developing a sense of nationality themselves before even the Ottoman Empire collapsed. There was a time when, under Ottoman Empire rule, I believe it was the Mamelukes, actually invaded and took over the area temporarily before the Ottomans then came back and took it back over. But in this time, the Palestine region started becoming a little bit more autonomous. And because of all of this fighting and everything, they sort of had to be able to think on their own feet instead of waiting for, the Ottoman Empire themselves to do what they needed them to do. So they were fostering a sense of nationality at that point in the Palestinian people. And so that translates over to today, where these people still feel like this is their land. They can't just leave. This is where they're from. This is their land. It's the same thing as, like, if someone decided, you know what, I'm going to kick everyone that's living in New York out of New York. You're no longer welcome here. I mean, it's kind of like...
not just that, but they don't give them any money to resettle.
Yeah.
They have zero resources.
Yeah, I mean, if Canada just came over,
Yeah, most Americans, their wealth is tied up in their property. So we understand that if all of a sudden your property is confiscated and you're told, well, it's too bad, go somewhere else. Why don't you just move? Why don't you just move? With what money?
Yeah.
To where?
Yeah.
To where?
Yeah, I mean...
so that's just part of the problem.
but like I'm saying, though, that's not even, like, the question for a lot of them, though. It's not that... But where are we going to go? It's no, this is my home. This is my land, That's the main thing. That would also
be the immediate response of a lot of Americans if they suddenly got kicked out of their home.
Exactly, yeah. And, yeah, I mean, so that should show that, like, this is a lot more complicated than anyone wants it to be. And these people, these Palestinians, are rightfully in their own homeland, just as much, I guess, at this point as the Israelis are. Maybe even more so in some instances. But, like, I don't know how we go forward from here. Yep.
If we go back to what I was saying earlier about the northern kingdoms, the northern kingdom versus Judah. So Judah was comprised of the tribes of Benjamin and Judah. And then so you had so there was 12 tribes of Israel. One of which was Levi, which had no lands apportioned to it, because they were to be priests for the other tribes. And then each tribe was given their own land, specifically. So technically speaking, if you're using the Torah and the land apportionments, for the tribes of Israel. Technically, then, the only land that modern Jews can claim is the lands of Benjamin and Judah. They have no claim to Galilee, West Bank, Gaza, none of that. Jerusalem would be the northernmost point on their map.
Interesting.
That's if you're going to try to say that they have a right to that land because of their ancestry. They have no right to any land that was given to any of the other tribes of Israel.
That doesn't stop them from wanting more, though.
Of course not.
Of course.
But that just goes to show how disingenuous these arguments are.
Yeah. Very true.
Sorry. So that was why I made a point of pointing out the different kingdoms and stuff.
Yeah. So, Jordan, did you have much more for us to bring up here, though?
You know what?
This is your topic and everything? Yeah.
No, I think for reminding me, I almost forgot for a second you were talking so much.
Yeah, but, I'm sorry. I don't know. I'm passionate about the history.
I'm just taking a subtle dig. So I actually have a question for you guys.
Feels bad.
Gee, thanks, Aubrey. No, but I actually had a question, and one that I've been trying to answer this whole time, which is, so history has been brutal to the Jewish people as we went over here, and even it is understandable from our perspective of them not feeling welcomed, and that the only solution to that is having a place to call their own. Now, do you believe that yearning and that belief that that the only solution is a home to call their own is the right way to approach the issues that Jews were dealing all around the world? Or do you think there is maybe another option in there for them? Because I think that's the hard part for me to decipher, is that it is a religion, just point blank. And the Zionist movement, that was the thing that really, started people, to kind of trigger people to think about it in more as a nationality and as a racial identity in a sense. So, I don't know. I'm even not even sure I'm even asking the right question. It's just very confusing to me.
Yeah, it's part of the problem is a lot of this stems from not on the actual Jews part, but on the part of the people who say, "Oh no, the Jews should have their own homeland." There's this assumption that they can't be loyal to anyone other than their own people. They can't be loyal to a homeland. They can't be, whatever. It's actually an anti-Semitic view, and it's one that's been around for a very long time. This idea that, they're not like us. They're not one of us. And that's, that's kind of, I don't know necessarily how people who are raised Jewish I don't know if they think of themselves that way or not, but I definitely know that it's definitely an anti-Semitic view that people who aren't Jewish have about Jews. The idea that someone who is Jewish can't also be an American or can't also be English or German or whatever, it's racist. It's like saying, well, they're black. Obviously, they can't be a true patriot. What? Why not? They're Hindu. Obviously, they're not a real American. Why not?
You can be both.
You can be both.
Right.
I think it's sort of like an antiquated thought process that's slowly but in some way surely dying off. We see it here in America where we have the white nationalist movement and everything. That's going to die off eventually as well. I find it to be a dying way of thinking about the world and how you work in it. This is like the antithesis of secular nation, is what these people want. And that's what we seem to be striving towards, is more secularism and making things, where all people of all types of backgrounds can come together and live and coexist together peacefully and harmoniously. And these types of movements, like the one in Israel and here in America, they're antiquated, and I think they're ultimately going to lose the history battle. They're going to eventually die out. At least that's my hope. At least.
Yeah, it's. I don't know. Go ahead, Jordan.
No, I definitely would hope so. I mean, at this point in time, it doesn't seem like it, but I really do. I really do hope that's the case. And I also, researching about this topic, finding out that that if you're Jewish and from anywhere within the world, you still have a birthright to always return back to, or to move to Israel without without any proper, without having to jump through the same hoops as someone who would want to immigrate to another country that they weren't born into. And I just find that very interesting, and something that I think if that within itself, like just a bunch of people, like say me and some of my family, our ancestral roots lie in Africa. So we were just like, all right, we'll just take a plane to Africa and stay there. And it's like, that's not realistic. That's not something that we can just do.
Yeah.
But it's very interesting that, that Jewish people all around the world can do that in Israel.
I mean,
some Jewish people. So I mean, like, if you convert to Judaism, and so you're a first generation Jew, you don't have that automatic status.
Right.
I think what you just said there, though, Jordan, is exactly the same thing as what the Israelis are telling to the Palestinians. Just move out. This is our land now. And the Palestinians are like, this is our land too. We've been living here our entire lives. It's just like saying to like the African American families that have been here since before this was even a nation, because their ancestors were slaves, to saying like, you go back to Africa. It's like, this is my home here, though. Africa's not my home. This is my home. My whole family, my generations of my family were born here. You can't expect me to move somewhere else because you don't want me around, and
yeah, but that's what really just bogs my mind is that with any other context, I like a bunch of African Americans decide to move back to Africa and be like, well, just deal with the fact that we're here now. It's like, no, that doesn't it just doesn't work like that. And,
or even just, it's not even necessarily that. Like, I mean, if the country is willing to accommodate it, that's one thing. Right. But just simply having, by nature of birth, like, say, like, I was born here, but I had German ancestors, so I automatically also have German citizenship. But that was like 150 years since my ancestors last lived in Germany. That's fine.
Yeah, I would assume at that point they renounced their citizenship of Germany once they moved here. That's typically how it tends to work. But
yeah. But so I mean, it's one of those things that it's very odd.
Yeah.
And it's not even necessarily like, being upset at like special privilege or anything like that. It's more, I think what bothers me the most about it is the initial mindset of, well, let's just shove them into one tiny piece of land and forget about them because we don't want them here. And right. I think you still see that mindset around.
Yeah.
It's still prevalent. I mean, all those people shouting at, vaguely dark-skinned people to go back to Mexico. And a lot of them are sitting there like, my ancestors aren't even Mexican.
Could just say, well, give us back Texas, because that actually used to be Mexico. Thanks.
Yeah.
But,
like, my friend, her father's family, they were ranchers in Texas when it became part of the United States. So they became Americans at that point.
Yeah.
They never immigrated to the U.S. from Mexico. America just took the land they happened to be living on.
Pretty much, yeah.
And said, oh, yeah, by the way, oh, yeah, sure, you're citizens now. Okay, whatever.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm not even sure they were granted citizens. I think their kids became citizens because they were born here.
Yeah, that might be it. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure exactly how that worked. But yeah, I mean, these are problematic situations, you know, and like, and one of the things that Israel has been saying is like they're taking over these lands, and then they're basically saying, well, this is a Jewish state. If you're not Jewish, you don't have a say in what goes on here. So like, they're not giving the option of citizenship to the Muslims in Palestine to assimilate into an Israeli state. They will not give them the equal citizenship. They will not be able to have any sway in government. They have no power because they think that this is a Jewish-only state and only us only them have the say in what goes on there. And so that becomes pretty problematic, as you can imagine, you know? But...
Yeah.
yeah, I mean...
And it's not as simple as telling Israelis to, you know, go home either, because that is their home now, too. I mean, it's a very complicated system.
Yeah.
I mean... Yeah,
I mean, even the Native Americans here can't say go home to Europe to the Americans that are living here now. You know, like that's just implausible at this point. You know, there becomes a point where that just doesn't work anymore. You know,
Right.
Yeah,
and so something does have to be. Yeah, get rid of this stupid country. Oh God, you can have it back after Trump destroys it. It's pretty rough.
The question becomes, which country do I go to? Because I have quite a few to choose from.
You
Yeah.
can all come and enjoy Brexit with me.
I could do that. I'm pretty sure the Coles are from Brexit, or from the UK.
I want Britain
That's
to
an
be
English
back
type
British.
name.
And I mean, there's of course other components about this issue that we didn't go over. Of course, there's like Hamas, which is a really interesting, which is a really important, I guess, chapter within this conflict, and how it just complicated things even more further. But I mean, it's very devastating, you know, especially coming from an outsider's perspective, seeing all this brutality and violence that's being done to that's going on in Israel-Palestine, and it's like it seems very hopeless. It's definitely hopeless from our perspective. I mean, there's really nothing that we can do, but over there it's just perpetual, and it doesn't seem to be any sign of it, you know, having a resolution, and it's only going to become more complicated. And Palestinians are stuck within the Gaza Strip because, you know, the Israeli government has forces there keeping them exactly there, like they're literally imprisoned within that land, and it's like, well, then again, Hamas, you know, is waging a war, which by the way, Hamas is a militant group. It's a Palestinian Islamist political organization that has waged war against the Israeli government in the 1980s. They seem to be in control of the Gaza.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was what I was going to say. Yeah, Hamas controls Gaza right now. They took power in Gaza after the death of Yasser Arafat, who was the leader of Palestine in the 80s and 90s and into the 2000s until his death in 2005. And then after that point, the Gaza Strip and the West Bank sides of the Palestinians kind of became strained, and then they kind of broke ties from each other. Hamas controls Gaza and the West Bank. I'm not entirely sure who controls the West Bank at this point. It's not Hamas, from what I know, though.
I think they're allied with Jordan because they seem to use Jordan to get to the UN a lot.
Yeah.
Whoever's in control there. I'm not sure who it is.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you at this point. I guess I should have looked that up, but...
Yeah. I mean, as far as I know, Israel has been in control of the West Bank since the war in 1960.
I mean, they control the territory for the most part, but there are places where there is a Palestinian government in place. They do control some parts of it.
Okay, right.
I think Israel just has more like a military control of the area more than they do a government control. Other than, I guess, in their settlements into the West Bank is... Actually, I just watched a video from, I think it was Vox earlier. It was a 3-part series, actually, and they talked about how, like, the settlements in West Bank actually get more resources per person than the mainland people are in the regular, or the other part of Israel
in
itself.
The rest of Israel?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the settlements get more money per person than the people in Israel do, which is interesting. Yeah. So they get better educations and better security and everything too. It's interesting.
Yeah. And that's why a lot of businesses moved out there. So, which is part of the reason why BDS is targeting businesses in the West Bank. Because if they basically make it so that the perks that they get from Israel for having a business out there is not worth people, the bad association and stuff, and people boycotting them, then they'll eventually move back to Israel proper. And several companies have already done that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. They're basically incentivizing people to actually go out and resettle or settle areas in the West Bank, basically, when they're not supposed to be doing that at all. The West Bank is supposed to be Palestinian land, at the very least, but Israel just keeps pushing the borders and everything, and it's a pretty messed up situation.
Yeah, it really is. And apparently the estimates are that Arabs are either close to or do outnumber Jews within Israel-Palestine, which makes it even more difficult. Which makes it an even more difficult conversation for Israel if they want to be a democratic state, because if they do give them the right, Arabs the right to vote within their elections, it does give the potential that they will favor, of course, Palestinian Arab politicians.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add, that might give you like an inkling of an idea as to why the Israelis cannot possibly allow, the Arabs or the Palestinians to actually have any kind of say in the government, because they would lose it if they did, potentially. Right.
That's also why they're constantly trying to convince Jews that live elsewhere in the world to move to Israel, to visit Israel and be like, see, it's a great, wonderful place. You should move here. You should move here. Help us, please. Because we need to outnumber the Palestinians. And then, oh, hey, we'll need more housing. So that price of land too.
Yeah. I mean, some of the settlements in the West Bank are beautiful. Like the houses and the areas are just really, really nice. And so they have like some of the best colleges, some of the most beautiful places to live and all this. And it's just basically more incentive to get people to move there and basically put the numbers in their favor, essentially. That is what they're trying to do, is trying to tip the scale in their favor. And once they can actually have the majority of people in the region, then maybe at that point, when they're a solid majority and the Palestinians can't possibly compete with them anymore, maybe then they would open up to an ability for them to become citizens, because then they could just basically lord over them anyway.
Yeah.
That's my guess.
I mean, and it's not, well, and especially in this case, I mean, you've had the conservatives in control of Israel since what, the 70s? You know, I mean, so it's thinking about it in those terms. I mean, look at the stuff that our conservatives do to try to stack the votes in their favor. You know, like as far as districting and, you know, requirements to vote and stuff like that. I mean, there's been a lot of states passing ID laws and stuff like that, trying to limit the vote. So, I mean, it's pretty much the same thing there. It's just because, of course, what Palestinian is going to vote for the Likud party? You know?
Pretty much.
My bet would be not very many.
For people out there that don't know what the Likud party is, that's the right-wing Israel party, right? Like Benjamin Netanyahu is a part of that party?
Benjamin Netanyahu's party, yeah.
Right.
So, I mean, it's the same sort of tricking and sort of being like, okay, well, so how can we get people to vote for us? Okay, how do we prevent people who aren't going to vote for us from voting? Okay, this kind of thing.
Right. And just for like a just to be clear too, that a lot of this is an indictment of the Israeli government. None of this is a critique on Jewish people themselves. There's plenty of, especially over here in the States specifically, because that's what I've been seeing a lot of Jewish-led organizations who are vying for a more peaceful process and are condemning the Israeli government for how their brutalization of the Palestinians.
Yeah. I mean, like I said earlier, a lot of the people who have done some of the most horrific acts are long dead. You know. Yeah. You can yell and rage all you want about it. It's not going to change anything. They're dead. They can't answer for their crimes.
Yeah. And the last part I wanted to add in here, I don't know how much more time we have left here, but the last thing I wanted to talk about was, America and its role in this. You did say earlier that there's not much we can do, but there actually is. America has a very large amount of influence on this process. And the problem has been that America has been siding solidly with Israel in those talks. And so what that does is it actually emboldens Israel to keep pushing and pushing and pushing. And because America kind of has like a mandate in some ways over the UN, we have a overruling power in the UN because of how powerful we are.
Use a lot.
Yeah, exactly. And so since we have that power, Israel gets to do basically whatever they want, and there's not much the UN is able to really do about it. But if we actually had people here in America that were controlling the government that actually wanted to change this and come about to a peaceful solution, maybe a two-state solution, we could do it if we actually had people to do that. But like we've said earlier, Republicans and Democrats are both solidly on the side of Israel. And because of that is why things don't really change.
I think we're starting to see a bit of movement there. We're starting to see candidates who aren't, 100% in support of Israel, who are saying, hey, Israel might be doing some shit too, stuff like that. So I think we are starting to see some movement there. It's just a matter of basically keeping it going.
Yeah.
Right.
And I just had one last thing also in conjunction with that. You would think that because of our overwhelming support of Israel, that there must be maybe the Jewish lobby in this country is really solidly behind this, and they're the reason why this is happening. Actually, it's actually the evangelical Christians that are solidly behind the movement for Israel to actually have its own sovereignty and state and everything. They are the ones. The Christians are the ones that are pushing harder than anyone else. Even harder. There is a Jewish lobby here in this country, but
AIPAC.
Yeah, they don't push as hard as the evangelicals are right now. And it is because of what we mentioned earlier. They think the end times are going to come sooner once Israel is fully in controlled by the Jewish people again. And so their idea in this whole thing is they want the end times to come sooner. And so that's it. You know, that's really why they want it to happen, so that they can go back to Jesus, I guess.
Yeah. And I guess for Trump, this is, officially opening the embassy in Jerusalem is sort of like a bone to his evangelical base for the midterms.
Yeah, I don't think he gives a damn about anything. So he just wants to do what is going to advantageously help him the most.
Let's be honest, it's not even strategy with Trump. It's more likely that someone told him to do it. He said, yeah, sure, I'll do that.
Yeah, Pence might have been
I put this more on something that Mike Pence really pushed him to do.
He's like, President Trump, me and the wife would really like it if you do, or what does he call his wife? Mother?
Mommy.
Me and Mother would really, we really think that you should do this over here. And he's like, whatever, I don't care.
Look, slow down a bit. He what?
What? Yeah, Mike Pence.
You've never heard of a man call his wife Mother before?
No.
It must be an American thing.
I have.
It's definitely not an American thing.
It's so it's something that usually, let's put it this way. It's
sort of
kind of
like a fundamentalist type
so
thing.
whenever I hear people actually using those terminology, it's usually a case of they're talking to their kids, or grandkids, stuff like that.
Your mother and I, that kind of thing. Oh.
Yeah, I mean, like, I heard Grandpa refer to Grandma as Mother all the time. But, I mean, he was always talking to... Well, actually, one time he was talking to his sister, so I don't know. But we were in the same room.
But when you're talking to, like, someone completely different, you just say...
Yeah, I've never heard him say that, when talking to, like, complete strangers.
Yeah.
That's not a thing.
But yeah. Mike Pence calls his wife Mother. Anyway.
That's kinky.
Sorry.
It's gotta be.
Yeah. Anyone else have anything before we wrap this up that they wanted to add that we didn't get to?
Maybe I just kind of wanted to relate a little bit. So I grew up, my parents did not want me watching the news or paying attention to the news at all because I don't know reasons. It was adult things or something like that. I don't know. But
because of America and freedom.
Yeah, all that. But then when I was in 6th grade, our social studies class or history class or whatever you want to call it, we had to write, current event reports every week. First time I'd ever had to do that. So, I start, having a newspaper and actually paying attention to the news for the first time in my life. And this was when I first encountered the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Uh-oh.
I had zero context going into it. I actually, prior to that point, hadn't even realized Israel was a country. And going into it, and then, of course, when they write these articles, they assume that everybody knows who everybody is. They assume that you know who the Palestinians are and you know who the Israelis are. And, so they were talking about, like, Yasser Arafat, and I don't even remember what the Israeli prime minister was at the time. There were all kinds of like photo shoots and stuff like that with Yasser Arafat with his like striped head thing, whatever they called him.
Striped head thing.
I know, whatever.
Great cultural insight.
Yeah.
So much cultural sensitivity right here. Jeez.
I don't know. I just remember it was striped, and it was kind of like, I don't know, but I was a kid. That's my excuse. Anyway, so that was my introduction to it. So I was given zero context going in. So I read these articles, and I remember sitting there going, okay, so very obviously the Palestinians are getting screwed, and the Israelis are the ones basically screwing them over. So why is everybody on the side of the Israelis? I am so confused. Wait, who's the Jew and who isn't? I don't know. And I didn't know because I couldn't ask because everybody already knew. And, I was supposed to know, but I didn't. So for the longest time, I actually thought that, that I was super confused about the whole thing. But going into it without the context of knowing who was who, I knew as a 6th grader that the Palestinians were getting screwed over.
Yeah, that there was definitely something wrong there.
Israelis doing it.
Yeah. That's the interesting thing about kids is they do usually have a lot of like real good insight onto the world that adults seem to lack at times, and they can see more clearly things that are wrong and things that shouldn't be the way that they are at times. You know, it's interesting that it is the same time when kids are like, wait a minute, that doesn't seem right. That doesn't seem fair. Is the same time we also tell kids to sit down and shut up. And like, we're basically trying to placate them and force them to think exactly the way that we do.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I think what makes it, I mean, and I guess these will be my closing statements in a way, but I guess what makes it so difficult to be critical of of Israel, and it is important to make it to be distinct in your critique against Israel, to solely be about the government itself, because you do have to. But I believe that that people tread lightly or don't tread at all is because of the history, because of the brutal history of the Jewish people, and how, you know, they're in power, of course, in Israel-Palestine, of course, but speaking out against that power, which should be an uplifting, should be symbolically uplifting to Jewish people at large, but the fact that they have a brutal government in power is what makes it so difficult. You know, it's. I mean, especially for me, I really wanted to be careful on this topic at hand, because following, Bernie Sanders, for instance, who's spoken out against the Israeli government and has gotten flack, going as far as people labeling him as anti-Semitic, because
amusing in and of itself.
Right, but just because he critiqued the government itself, did make me very nervous about this topic. But I don't know. I don't really know what I'm trying to say. I just hope that we illuminate some things for our listeners about what's really going on.
I think I know what Jordan's trying to say here.
Please clap.
Yeah, and it's not that, like we hate Israel or anything like that. It's just sometimes this difficult conversations and stuff, and no country is perfect, and sometimes countries are just wrong, and it doesn't matter what ethnicity makes up that country. Sometimes they're just wrong.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Give me a break.
That's all I got to say about it.
Okay.
Mike, did you have anything to add here before we get out of here?
Not really.
Well,
You're still awake.
I guess that's a plus. He didn't fall asleep yet. But
No, you don't want
Hadn't said anything in so long.
no urging people to vote in their local elections. None of that.
Well, that's
Did you think there you go.
well, then the usual caveat: if any of this is interesting to you, then contact your senators and vote in your local elector, especially the midterms, which are coming up soon, I believe. Yeah.
Our primaries are coming up soon.
Sorry, it's 2:00 in the morning and I'm starting to fall asleep.
Oh yeah.
that's fine.
Do that. All right, and with that being said, I would like to thank my amazing hosts for partnering me with this daunting topic, and thank yourself for listening to us.
They're kicking me out the door.
Yeah, there you go. Yep.
They're kicking me out the door.
Yep. See you guys. No, that's fine. Yeah, I'm out of here. I gotta go. All right, see you.
With that, guys. Have a good night.